The toughest thing I had to do in my life is say goodbye to everyone I grew up with that last week before I left. But I knew that it'd all be worth it. I was off to start the next part of my life down under, in Australia. I was accepted to Northeastern's NUin program, which means that I would spend my first semester at college abroad. I had no doubts about going to Australia once I read the acceptance letter. I was more excited about being accepted to the NUin program than I would if I was accepted to the regular Boston campus. Before I left, I did not think about Australia much, so I had no idea what to expect when I came into the country. The fact that I was traveling for the first time in my life to a country all the way across the world with no one I knew finally set in that last week. I was more excited and nervous than I ever have been. Once I arrived, I was intrigued by the city of Melbourne. The main thing I did in the first month or two was explore the city. I visited the beautiful botanical gardens, the busy Flinders Street, the Crown Casino, and the graffiti-covered alleyways. I had a lot of fun settling in. It was weird at first being in a city I knew nothing about, but once I got used to it, I started having a really good time. I spent most of my time meeting Australians, making friends with the fellow NUin students, and bumming around Hawthorne and Melbourne for the first month I was here. The Crown Casino was my favorite spot. I quickly learned in the first month that even though winning was fun, losing was not worth it. It was weird, adjusting from my parents doing pretty much everything for me to having to cook my own meals and do my laundry, but I eventually adjusted, and frequently ended up going to our local supermarket, Safeway. Or, I would go out into the city and have a fun night eating out and exploring Melbourne. I have a lot of fun hanging around the local area with my friends, but the NUin experience makes sure we see more of Australia, and we frequently went on excursions to explore the country. The first trip we took was to the Healesville Sanctuary. It was a zoo where I could see all the animals from Australia in Australia. It was just like an American zoo, except instead of being able to pet goats, you're allowed to pet wallabies. Well, I'm not sure if you're allowed to pet them, but everyone was doing it, so it seemed like a good idea to me. After the zoo, we had some boomerang throwing lessons, where I managed to throw a boomerang for an hour straight without accidentally hitting someone with it that hard. The next place we went was to Phillips Island, which is pretty cool because we got to witness wild penguins swim into the shore at night. During the day, we got to enjoy the South Shore and check out the nice views near the beach. We also went to an Australian football game, which they call footy. It was an awesome experience at first, but after a while, I gave up on trying to understand the rules of the game and went home. You'd have to be in Australia for a good year to even have a clue at what is happening in that game. One of the longest days here for me is the Great Ocean Road, which was pretty cool because I got to see wild koalas and what's left of the remaining 12 apostles, but it was a very long bus trip, which made it go by pretty slowly. But I think it was worth it for the great views, and I finally got to see how well my business was in my chicken joint. The next place I visited was Torquay, one of the biggest surfing beaches in Australia. Not only did I get to surf, but I got to enjoy the great outlet malls and the area near the beach afterwards. After we went to the outlet malls, we got to visit Bell's Beach, where the water was a little more intense, but watching the surfers there inspired me to surf more when I get back home. The last excursion we went on is by far my favorite. It was to Sydney. Sydney is one of my favorite places in the world. It is a clean city with fun bars, many attractions such as the Opera House, and multiple famous beaches surrounding the main city. We spent one weekend there, and during that weekend I went to Bondi Beach, Manly Beach, and I saw the Sydney Opera House. I did not expect much from Sydney going into it, but it's much nicer than I could have imagined. In addition to excursions, Northeastern also organized something called Service Learning to make sure that we give back to the community during our time here. Our group would help out big events for charity. The events were Walk in the Park, Hoop Around the Bay, and my favorite, the Melbourne Cup. The Melbourne Cup is an event that is so big that the whole country of Australia shuts down to watch the horse races. And I got to be there helping out a charity called Sacrifice, which helps feed the hungry in Australia. And I helped out by selling pins. Being able to help out was fun because I got to enter the event and be part of the atmosphere. Everyone goes nuts at the races, and all the girls there are beautiful. Another big part of my experience in Australia is my spring break. I went with 10 of my friends to a place called the Gold Coast and stayed at a hotel in Surfers Paradise. During the week I was away, I got to explore a whole new part of Australia. I went to a great theme park called Movie World and a water park called Wet n Wild. The nightlife of Surfers Paradise was fantastic. Clubs and bars lined the streets, all of them next to great places to eat, like Macca's, which is McDonald's, and Noodle Box, which is a noodle place. My spring break at Gold Coast was definitely not an experience I am going to forget anytime soon. With my time in Australia coming to an end, I realized that I have significantly matured, and that this experience has made me a better individual. I am ready to head home to Northeastern knowing that I can handle anything Boston throws at me after the amount I have built as a person on this trip. Even though I look forward to heading back, I know I will always miss the time I had here. Goodbye, Australia.